What you're about to see is probably one of the most interesting and deepest metro interchange stations ever built, and I hope this will be the most interesting video on this very interesting interchange. Now, 2021 has been a great year for the channel, as I've got the chance to see a number of impressive projects firsthand, including major regional rail works, giant new bus terminals, and Toronto Line 5. But, not to be outdone, the REM, who invited me out to Montreal for the unveiling of their first trains last year, invited me back once again this year for something so much bigger. Let's take a look. A huge shout out to my patrons and YouTube members for helping me make this trip possible. Consider supporting the channel for early access to videos and to help me bring you more content like this. Edouard-montpetit is an unassuming station on Montreal's existing Blue Line, which sits on the north slope of Mount Royal, for which Montreal gets its name. Now, directly below the metro station, roughly 70 meters, or around 20 stories underground, is the Mount Royal Tunnel, which opened in 1918 and carried electric commuter trains back and forth from downtown Montreal, under the mountain and to points north for decades. With the construction of the REM, Montreal's new regional metro network, this century-old tunnel is being retrofitted for modern fire safety standards, and to handle very frequent automated metro train operations. You can learn more about the REM in my dedicated Demystified video in the top right corner. Now, what's so impressive are the two new stations being added within the tunnel to allow metro transfers where the tunnels previously crossed, but no such connection was available. One in the downtown core at McGill, just below the surface, and today's station of interest, Edouard-montpetit, which is not just below the surface. We showed up to the site nice and early on a brisk Wednesday morning. It was amazing to see just how busy the surrounding area was, with all the students from the local schools and the University of Montreal walking around the crowded surface streets around the station construction site. This community will soon have a brand new transit connection and way of accessing the rest of the region, which is really awesome. Now, after a brief but comprehensive safety meeting, we headed over to the construction site to head deep underground, donning our hard hats, safety glasses, steel-toed boots, emergency headlamps, leather gloves, and high-vis. This was a much more serious safety environment than the last time I was in Montreal, where we were mostly walking around a nicely organized train storage building. This site is filled with massive steel girders and heavy equipment, as well as giant drops, rubble, and uneven ground, so safety was really taken up a notch. You may have noticed that Dr. Jonathan English from the Toronto Board of Trade, whom I've talked to in a few other videos, was also on the tour, hopefully scoping out some of the great work on this project to bring back to Toronto. Once we actually got across the street to the station site, it was really surprising to see how far along the station structure was. This is no longer a giant pit in the Earth's surface, and the station structure and structural steel is already well above ground level, tracing the lines of the future entrance pavilion. It's really astounding when you're actually on the construction site just how tight the space is, crammed between two wings of the adjacent building. It feels like doing open heart surgery through a pinhole. The construction and logistics work here is really impressive. Perhaps even more impressive though is that the station was actually constructed with micro-blasting, where tiny amounts of explosives were used to excavate the rock down to the tunnel. That same rock will actually be used as ballast on other parts of the network. Heading below ground on my first construction elevator ride, yes, you really get the sense for just how incredibly deep the station is. The ride on the elevator was long, but the metal grates allow you to peer through to the underground facility surrounding you. Perhaps the most visible thing when we reached the mezzanine level deep below the ground was the cavernous nature of the space and the cool but not frigid air. This is maybe the most striking station ever constructed in Canada, if not North America. It has the massive volume of an iconic Montreal metro station, but very deep underground. Some of this space will be filled up with technical equipment and ventilation shafts, which will pull smoke out of the tunnel in case of a fire. You can also see membranes being placed on the ceiling of the cavern that are used to waterproof the space, which was fairly damp and spotted with puddles at the time. Now, if you're wondering how passengers will get down here, the final station will have a bank of large, high-speed elevators that will provide access in just about 20 seconds from ground level. But of course, our journey was slower and louder. You can actually see where the future elevators will go right here. To be clear, there aren't publicly accessible stairs or escalators to get down to the lower levels, as the space required to provide adequate capacity and to allow long enough escalators would be enormous. That said, as you might expect, there are emergency stairs which you could climb out of if there was a problem. If you're wondering why this part of the mezzanine is so large, that would be because it needs to be able to accommodate the rush of people from a 4-car train unloading into this space and waiting for elevators, which will make quick work of even a large crowd. When completed, this will be the deepest station in Canada, and the second deepest in North America after Washington Park Station in Portland, which, while also impressive, is a lot smaller. I've visited a couple times traveling down from Vancouver. Walking through the large orange partition hanging across the space, we came to the main over-platform mezzanine area of the station and transitioned from a nice concrete floor to muddy, rocky gravel. Here there are 2 sets of vertical shafts across from slope shafts, which will accommodate elevators on one side and escalators and stairs on the opposite. There's also a central third connecting tunnel entirely dedicated to ventilation. The reason this third tunnel exists is because platform screen doors will seal in the platforms. Continuing along the mezzanine, we actually got to descend on what I was assured is not a final staircase to platform and track level. Standing on the track bed of the Mount Royal tunnel was incredibly cool, and probably the highlight of the visit. The tunnel's single arch was highly visible, though eventually the tunnel will be split with the center wall for fire safety isolation, as we see in other single-bore metro tunnels, like in Vancouver. I have to say, this space was also huge, and it's kind of hard to get it across with video, but if you take a look at that container in several of these shots, this cavern is also several stories tall. While the space wasn't dusty or particularly treacherous, there was certainly a lot of groundwater being pumped into small ponds on the sides of the access tunnels. What you really come to realize, standing below what will eventually be a platform, is just how amazing it is that this complex structure was all excavated below an operational metro line and around a very old railway tunnel, with explosives, which is crazy. You can clearly tell the space which will eventually be the platform portion of the station from the much wider space afforded. Of course, as with the other stations on the system, Edouard-montpetit will have 80-meter platforms with platform screen doors. Now, we did get a chance to talk to some of the great people from the project and the consortium constructing it, and some of the stuff they told me only increased my love for this project. People do find it sort of funny that I like the REM so much, but it's just got it all. It's as large as some entire transit networks, it has all the latest technology, including Wi-Fi all the way down here below ground, and subtle touches that I honestly never expected to see in a new North American system. Notice these limestone rock walls here, here, and here? These will be left exposed in the final station, something famously done in Stockholm, which will give the station an incredibly cool mix of modern design and geology, which will remind you just how far underground you really are. As things were getting chilly, we started our walk back up the stairs and over to the elevator shafts. Passing through the main mezzanine, we got a much better look back at the structure filling up the shaft that connects the new station to the surface. To put things in perspective, this alone is 4 or 5 stories tall. As it turns out, the escalators needed to connect the platforms will actually be delivered down the shaft where the construction elevator is currently located, which will definitely involve some ship-in-a-bottle style maneuvering of escalators which typically come as one piece. After talking a bit more about the facility, and in what felt like no time at all, we were back on the surface and walking back to the site office, though not before noticing the new pedestrian tunnel connection which will link the REM to the metro station across the street. All in all, visiting the Mount Royal tunnel before it's been transformed for the REM was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that I'm incredibly grateful for, and seeing Edouard-montpetit being so massively expanded, I couldn't help shaking with excitement. This project reminded me once again just how impressive the scale of Montreal's infrastructure is, and just what a special city it is. Riding the metro over from Namur and appreciating the cathedral-like underground station there really made it clear that with the REM, Montreal is finally back to its glory days of engineering transit that will remain astounding for decades. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more Montreal and REM content coming up in the future.